Well, good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, depending what part of the world you're joining us. Thanks for coming to today's Budgeting for Piper Compliance live stream. Part of our What's Privacy Got to Do with It community live stream put on by the TLC group of companies as well as Abacus. My name is Tahira, I'm the CEO, and I'm joined by Lennox, who's the Director of Accounting Services at Abacus.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be back here again after a successful 2022 series, and we are really anxious to share with you some additional information in 2023.
Yes, I mean the first quarter is finished, isn't it, Lennox? In a few weeks, we'll
I
be
know.
getting into April and second quarter, and this time of the year, a lot of organizations are actually looking at budgets. Especially for those who have their financial year to start in April. So we really encourage individuals, to share this video. So once we finish the live stream, it will be available on our LinkedIn page, so that you can go back and look at it and really see what's what you need to be doing as an organization when it comes to budgeting. We have for Piper compliance, which is Bermuda's Personal Information Protection Act, but you could really use some of these tips and guidance for any data protection legislation that you're looking to comply with. We are taking questions, so feel free to put your questions in the chat. At the end, we will hopefully we'll have time. We'll be able to answer any questions you may have around some of the topics we discuss. If you do have questions, we do just ask that you keep them to sort of a generic, nothing specific necessarily about your organization. All right, so let's get started with getting prepared. Lennox, I mean, what should organizations really be thinking about when it comes to preparing from a financial standpoint and a resource standpoint for compliance with these data protection legislations?
Well, we all know it's inevitable. The act is coming into play, and the requirements, the fines, all that is going to be happening. So, in regards to getting prepared, I mean, if you're not there as yet, as Tahira said, there are some companies who have fiscal years of December, and they would have already probably done their budgets for 2023. But there are also companies who have other fiscal years that doesn't fall on the calendar year, and a big part of getting prepared is determining what fiscal impact putting certain things in place is going to have on your organization in order to be compliant with the laws and the different legislation that's coming into play. As well as operationally, I think as well, you got to look at take a hard look at your resources, determine which resources you can use to help get certain policies in place, and not just the initial implementation, but also the ongoing monitoring to ensure that the system remain effective and efficient in its operations.
All right, thanks. Sorry about that, guys. Listen, things happen. I had some technical challenges. Thank you, Lennox, for keeping it going. I really do apologize for that. But yeah, I think it really makes sense for organizations, whether you're just starting or you're already underway with those preparations, is to really look at how you can make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck, right? In this day and age, we all, have some sensitivity around financial implications for your business. So we really want to ensure that you have sort of some good advice and guidance around, budgeting and cost savings and ways to really be creative with using a data protection budget. All right. Okay, so we started to talk a little bit about it, but really when it comes to organizations, it's more about them being, would you say, being proactive, not reactive when it comes to budgeting?
That's correct here. I mean, if you just go back to the definition of budgeting, it's really about, in layman's terms, it's actually creating a roadmap for your company in regards to your expenses and your revenues. Um, so it has a futuristic look. You don't budget historic operations, you budget future performance. So really, by creating that roadmap, you have an idea of one, how you can help control the business finances. Two, you're helping to ensure that the business can fund its commitments and meet its objectives. And also you're also creating an additional control in regards to monitoring where you spend money. A lot of people don't recognize, but the budget is actually a control mechanism that you can implement in your business to determine when things are going rearward.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, from my perspective as a consultant, when it comes to data privacy protection and cybersecurity, when clients come with no budget or no idea of what a budget could be, it can make it challenging to be able to provide a solution that really makes sense for that business. So, for instance, if I give an example, a company may say, okay, well, we want to ensure that our retention policies and things is all up to date. But they haven't done a data map to even understand where the data is or what data they're holding. So being able to look at an organization and be able to determine what that budget would be. Now, some people, they may have boards or executive or, financial team or an accounting provider like yourselves at Abacus. But for many organizations, we know you may not necessarily have in-house or readily available resources. So we're hoping that today some of these topics we touch on, about the different cost options, conducting a cost benefit analysis, the resources that may be required, may be helpful in just really making you understand what budgeting means to your organization. And is there like a broad definition of what a budget is? I know you mentioned a control and things like that. But when it comes to for an organization, what their bottom line impacts are when it comes to a budget. Are you able just to talk about that briefly, Lennox?
Yeah. So budgeting is a process of really creating a plan of how to spend your money, and the plan also involves how you're going to raise the money that you're going to spend as well. So creating this plan allows you to determine in advance whether you will have enough money to do the things that you need to do, or you would like to do, not you need to do, but you would like to do. And in some cases, budgeting is about simply balancing your expenses with your income. I know in government in particular, they speak a lot about a balanced budget, and what that means is that basically you're trying to determine what level of revenue do I need in order to cover all the expenses that I have. And that is what is really known as a balanced budget. You're just looking to get enough revenue in the door that you can cover all your expenses.
All right. But most, no, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of organizations, they want more than that
Yes.
balanced budget. They're the business of making money, making a bit of a profit. So I know some in my conversations with some clients, they are, genuinely concerned that this process of becoming compliant with the legislation will impact that bottom line, their profits. At least in the immediate term, as you look at as a project. So the initial implementation as a project, but then there's these ongoing costs, which we will get to a little bit further in our talk today. And when we approach clients, like I said, we try to, as best as possible, create a solution that works for a budget, right? Because there are all sorts of different cost options and there's all different solutions. Some people have Ferrari dreams, but they may only have enough budget for a mobilette, So we really try to tailor what that solution could be when it comes to Data protection is sort of three real ways that you would say you would implement a program. So the first one is in-house. So you're either you have existing staff or you hire someone in-house to do this work for you. You may get a consultant where you outsource it totally. So TLC Group, we're a consulting firm. So we have consultants that work with clients. Some people may just say, well, listen, we want to be able to do some of it in-house, but that expert opinion or review of our program or our policies and procedures, we will then go for a consultant to provide that support. The legislation, the PIPA, it does allow for that external support. So some organizations like, oh gosh, I don't have anybody in-house, or I'm a single, one-man band entrepreneur or small business owner. How am I going to be able to manage, privacy and data protection alongside all of my other tasks and responsibilities? So that is one good thing about the legislation. It does allow for that external support or outsourcing totally of the privacy program to either a direct consultant or to a consulting firm. Yeah. When it comes to the actual work, again, there's sort of two of three, there's same three approaches. So you can do sort of a DIY, which is templates. Now, I do have a caveat. We do have some templates which we work with our clients to customize. The only thing with templates, you have to be really careful that they are reflective of what's going on in your environment. So, a DIY, you can buy some template packs online for a couple of $100s, right? You may be able to get some with added support. So some clients, they say, well, we purchased this template pack. It was GDPR. We're not really sure if it works for Bermuda's PIPA, what bits should be taken out, what needs to be tweaked, things like that. So you really need to be careful when you are working with templates, especially ones that are not PIPA specific. The TLC ones we do have are PIPA specific, but where they are not, that they are reflective of the legislation that you're adhering to, as well as that they reflect your current working environment. So for instance, we reviewed a template for incident response, and it says, the first point of contact for a breach is the incident response manager. So I said, okay, well, who is that person? Oh, we don't have anybody in that role. It's like, okay, you've got in your policy, and this is where you're directing staff to follow the policy. So again, just being really vigilant and reading those policies or procedures that you get as templates is key. I also wanted to mention, for obviously DIY tends to be on the cheaper end. The Office of Privacy Commissioner in Bermuda, they do have an engagement unit, and they can review policies and procedures. They also have a sandbox, which is for sort of entities that want to, maybe just have their program reviewed. They can also provide that support. And of course, because it is a publicly funded body, that service is free at the moment. And, organizations can take advantage of that now. Yeah. So go ahead.
There, just a quick query. So, or a comment. So, as part of, I know you haven't gone through all the different options is there in terms of cost, but as part of your budgeting process, I think each company really needs to get information on what each of these will cost, and not just wait until it's time to implement to reach out to get this cost, because you want to be able to make decisions way ahead of time as to which option you're going to take. So when the time comes to actually engage outside service provider to get it done, you're not scrambling in terms of looking where you're going to get this money from. It's already in the budget, and you already basically have the approval to spend whatever level of money that you have that you need to spend to get your program going.
Yeah. And that makes it a lot easier, and not just for if you hire an external consultant, but it also makes it easier for the internal resource that may be putting the program in place. If they know that they have XY budget, then they can conduct themselves accordingly. There's nothing worse. I've worked internally and obviously as a consultant for companies. There's nothing worse than sort of putting together a proposal, a solution that really meets the needs of the organization, and then they come back and say, "Oh well, we didn't have any money for that." Right? I'm sure we've all experienced that. You've had a suggestion or project, and they come back and say, "Well, no, we don't actually have the money for that particular project." So having that budget up front and going through, Abacus, I'm sure that's something you could probably support clients with as well, which I think you'll talk about in a minute. But I just wanted to remind organizations that proactiveness, that forward-thinking leadership may be the key between you having, a budget that is out of sync with what your, that's in sync with what your profit expectations are. So as Lennox just mentioned, having that up front, preparing as much as possible in advance is sort of an ideal standpoint to take when it comes to money and financial management. Yeah. So the DIY, as I said, again, there's lots of information. There's YouTube videos where you can go and learn how to do certain things around a privacy program. Again, these are all DIY things. Some organization might say, well, listen, I don't have the time for that. I don't have the interest for that. I want to then go and, get a custom program. Now, we're getting a little bit more to the higher end of a package. So they may say, well, just design what a program would be for my organization, have interviews with my staff or the key business unit owners and see what it is, and then come back with a package. Now, again, this would be sort of towards the higher end, but there is always some flexibility around what that budget could look like. So, for instance, if it's a smaller entity, it could be 5,000. If it's a larger entity, it could be 50, 60,000. It really just depends what that organization already has in place. Because obviously, if they've already got they've got a privacy notice, they've done some work around data mapping, like finding their data flows, how it comes in and out of the organization. They've done some retention. That may be the starting point for the program. So they may not need a full blown package, right? So a lot of times, some entities where they are cash rich but time poor tend to go for sort of a more custom program where they're like, listen, we don't have the time or energy. Just go ahead, put something in place for us, and then we can go from there. Then sort of the hybrid option for that is entities, they get someone to do the program for them. And then they have someone who comes in afterwards and reviews it and makes sure that it is actually fit for purpose. And of course, because that one is more of an advisory perspective, you're more just paying for consulting hours. So some clients, they may say, well, we'll purchase 20 client hours from you and, a bundle, and we'll just use them when we need it, and that way, those packages and those bundles can be a great way for organizations to manage their money as well. Because you've got a fixed cost, this is what it'll be, and you can move forward from there.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Also with when it comes to a data protection program, there's that initial cost, right? So you've got the initial cost of making sure you've got your policies, procedures, that you've got training. So that's a direct cost for many organizations, getting training in place, reviewing what your data that needs to be destroyed or disposed of at that point. You may have some immediate costs, but there are some ongoing costs as well. So did you just want to talk just really brief, because I know we are going to cover ongoing costs, but did you want to just talk briefly here, Lennox, about the importance of budgeting for that initial project cost and then those ongoing costs to come?
Yeah, sure. So with especially the initial project costs, and tell us the ongoing costs as well. What you really want to do when you're creating your budget for that is actually do a cost benefit analysis as well. So Tahira just mentioned that there are some organizations that are cash rich and time poor. So in making decisions as to whether which option you take, You also want to look at, okay, if I want to do this internally, is going to need internal resources to reallocate the time from probably a revenue raising operation to doing this. So what revenue am I going to lose by doing that? Would it be more beneficial for me just to get a custom program where we have experts as well in the field, like TLC doing this, and you're guaranteed that you're going to have a system that works specifically for your organization. You really want to look at, you want to put a value on that. Basically, what is the benefit of doing that? So there are also some other benefits you want to look at in regards to when you're deciding which cost option you're going to take. One great benefit of having a program in place is compliance. You're complying with the legislation, which means that you're avoiding fines and fees that might come about if you don't comply. So there's a great benefit. It might help you to increase customer base. So again, you're looking at it from a revenue perspective. You're incurring a cost, but then incurring this cost is allowing you to create or generate even more revenue that is going to cover that cost and more. So the bottom line overall is going to be impacted in a positive way. You're going to be improving your operations, and that's both fiscally and operational efficiencies by creating a program like that. Some of the benefits that can come out of getting a program in place is in regards to data storage. You're going to reduce your data storage costs because as part of the program, obviously you're going to be weeding out all of the information that you don't need to have sitting around in cabinets. There's a cost of storing that information. And as part of your program, when you determine, okay, this is all the information I need really to maintain, and I can get rid of the other information, the storage cost of that information should be reduced by doing that. So that is definitely another benefit. It also helps in regards to improving employee culture, especially when you get employees involved in the budgeting process. Get their input, not just budget from a top level down. Have a budgeting process where you involve a lot of team members, regardless of what level they're at. It can definitely have a positive impact on employee culture. And you try, is not always a easy task to put a value to all of these things, to all of these benefits, and that's where the support of a firm like Abacus will come in. We would help you to determine the value. We probably don't have the answers right here and now, but working with you and pulling information from you and from your knowledge, we can help you put a value to all of these benefits and compare it to the cost of each option. And then from there, you can decide, okay, which option is actually the best option to move forward with the program. So that is simply a cost benefit analysis that you would have done.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Lennox. And then when it comes to cost benefit analysis for, let's say, smaller entities, where they may not even understand what their true costs are, how would you propose those entities get started? So, to be able to prepare the financial information that they need to maybe, talk with a company like yourselves, where should they start?
Well, there are a lot of companies out there that do have this information, including companies like ORSA or the TLC Group, who actually would have the information on the cost of these different programs. The commissioner here on island would also have an idea of what are costs of implementing the different programs and the different approaches to implementing. They would also have that information. So I said it really starts with making contact with people in the industry, in the accounting industry, in the advisory industry, who can help you to either have a database with this cost, or they can help you to gather this cost based on the information that they get from other partnering firms or firms that they have alliances with.
Okay, thanks. And then just to delve a little bit further, and I'm picking your brain this time a lot, Lennox, because budgeting, this is all your baby, right? As a consultant, I love when people come in for budget because now I know what car I'm going to show them, right? So
Yeah.
think about myself as a dealer, like, okay, which car are we going to show them? The gently used, you know, the latest model, the limited edition, what can we show them? But just the other question follow up I had with that is, so if a company wanted to start the budgeting process and they may not, just like if I think of someone like a hairdresser perhaps,
Hmm.
or a massage therapist. I use massage therapists. Quite often they may have a lot of forms, a lot of personal data that they're collecting, like health data, because obviously if they're going to be doing treatments, they need to be aware, if there are any medical conditions, right? So massage therapists may be collecting lots of personal data. They've never really done a financial statement. They just get paid and they pay the bills and they move on. Before they come to an organization like yours or another financial services company, what would they need to bring to be able for you to be able to meaningfully support them in doing this cost benefit analysis, or getting a budget prepared for data protection?
Well, for one, we really need you to be able to speak to the industry that you're in, because at the end of the day, you're the expert in your particular industry, and you would have an idea of what different items are needed or what different services are needed for you to produce your product or service. So we need you to gather information on that. If it's an established business, obviously. We would need to have information on what you have spent historically, and that can be in the form of invoices, receipts, bank statements. If you haven't put those together to create financial reports as yet, we would be able to gather that information or that data and produce information in the form of financial reports that we can then use to project or create budgets for future expenditure and income based on what you would have done historically, and taking other variables in place into consideration, like inflation obviously is a big thing. In terms of budgeting, we'll take that into consideration. If the market is, based on your market knowledge, if you determine that the market is going to change in terms of demand, we will take that into consideration as well in determining and helping you determine what your budget looks like going forward. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's some great advice there, because I always try to say to people that data protection or compliance program, don't look at it for just what it is. Having to actually look at what your costs are, because you now want to obviously find a budget to do your data protection program. That's added benefits for your business, because now you're actually, you may not have looked at it for a while. For some organizations, they may have done a, financial review, 3-4 years ago before COVID, right? Now this could be an opportune time for you to say, okay, well, we want to do this program, we want to be compliant. Now let's really look at what our costs are, revenues are in our organization. And like I said, I always try to find different ways that data protection can be leveraged for transformation, for advancement of a business. That makes sense. Yeah. All right. Great. So cost benefit analysis. Thanks for that, Lennox. Some of those benefits you mentioned, as well as what organizations, should be coming to either their in-house financial people or an external entity. The next bit we want to talk about is the resources. So we've talked a lot about money, and there's financial aspects, which we'll continue to talk about in this section. But there's also employment and operations that are resources that you need to think about. Okay. So the first one, obviously the financial resources, having the money at hand. Some organizations, they may spread the costs through the year. So they may say, well, we're going to take a 6-month approach, or we'll take a 12-month approach to becoming compliant. So that costs, XYZ per month. right? Other entities will say, well, this is what, we know, we've met with Abacus, we know what our budget is, we've got the money, and we're just going to go ahead and pay it and get it done, and at least off our books. Do you recommend any particular strategy? Would you recommend, organizations look at spreading costs, or would you say making them find the money up front is more advantageous?
Well, it really depends on where the organization is at, and in regards to spreading costs, uh, if your cash flows does not allow you to incur the cost upfront, the obvious thing would be to spread that cost over a period of time. The other thing, in terms of reporting that cost as well, there might be some investments that you make that you can actually amortize that cost over a period of time, because the program or itself, or some of the assets that you might have to buy for the program, are going to benefit the business for more than one fiscal year. So you can actually just not, you don't see a huge impact on your bottom line in one year. That cost can actually be spread over a number of years, because the benefits you're reaping from this investment is actually not just in that 1 year you make the expenditure. So you basically put it on a balance sheet, record that cost on a balance sheet as an asset, and you amortize it over a period of 5 years or a period of 3 years, whatever period you determine or management determine is the useful life of that program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because data protection, a lot of the systems that you'll be putting into place, they're not just sort of one-time use systems and artifacts. So you can, as Lennox mentioned there, amateur. I knew it was a word. I just could not remember what that word was. Bookkeeping 101 for me was very long ago, Lennox.
Understandable.
Yeah, I do remember there is that option as well. So the next resource that we talk about is employment. So when we talk about employment and employees, data protection should be a company-wide project or company-wide activity, especially if your organization is looking to do holistic data protection. So ensuring that the whole entity is sort of, rowing in the same direction when it comes to data protection. There is a cost to employees and employers for getting compliant. So for instance, if I'm an administrator, I'm a receptionist, I'm at the front desk, I see and greet everybody, I manage a visitor's log. I may be the go-to person for holding people's spare keys for the offices and things like that. Getting me trained is imperative for an organization. Ensuring that I follow the correct policies and procedures. I may have an office, a mail office, or a filing room that I'm responsible for. Now I have to go in and review and see what data we actually collect. So good employers, really need to be cognizant of the time that's required for those employees as well. And then employees also need to be aware that, it is a priority task, that, making sure that your organization is protected is not just in the organization's best interest, it's in people's personal best interests, because the legislation in Bermuda does allow for personal liabilities, right? So if you yourself are responsible for a breach, an incident, when it comes to personal data, you can be fined or imprisonment, time in jail. So when it comes to resource management, please don't forget the people piece. I have worked with some organizations, unfortunately, where we've come in, the people on the ground don't even know what we're doing. They have no clue. They're like, why are these people asking me all these questions? I've got month end to do. I can't come and meet with these TLC people. So when it comes to the budgeting, you also want to budget people's time as well. So we always pad out in terms of time, how long something's going to take. So, a company may say, well, yeah, we've got 2 months, sure, we can do it. And we're like, well, you have to factor in, people may have more pressing work to do. People may go on holiday, people may go sick. So we sort of err on the side of caution when it comes to that. But I would encourage employers to make sure that they have budgeted in for their work expectations from their staff when they're doing a data protection program, that they've padded in some time to say, okay, well, this person works 20 hours or to 30 hours a week. We're doing our data protection program. I may only get 15 or 25 productive hours out of them because while we're doing that, because they have to do these other responsibilities as well.
Okay. And Tihara, would you say just that initial training to get the program implemented, would you say that is enough?
When you say to get the training, you mean training for the staff?
Yep, training for the
Okay.
staff. Is that enough, or should employees also consider, okay, what is it going to look like, because I'm going to need my employees to keep up to date with the changes in the legislation, and would it be required to have a provision for ongoing training as well?
No, for sure. So every employer should be offering to their employees, if they're responsible and want to be socially responsible, some sort of data protection training, right? Some may do it on onboarding, so before the person even starts. That's great. That's a real good way to sort of start as you mean to go on. Others may say, well, we'll do it every year at this certain time. This is whoever's with the company at that time gets the training. Now that's a start. The best way is to do it at onboarding and then on an annual basis offer refresher training. So that refresher training, you may go in and work with, or they may have training specifically for different roles or business units. So now the company may have, the individual may have been doing data protection activities for 12 months. So now they're like, okay, well, I've noticed that we're doing this in this particular way. How can we do it better? I don't think we're compliant. How can we actually get compliant? So the refresher trainings, I generally encourage organizations to make them either role specific, business unit specific, or on updates to the legislation. Because you don't want people to think of the training as just a tick box and I'm going to sit there for an hour or do it on the computer for half an hour and then I'm done, and they don't really take notice of the content. So if you make the trainings each time interesting, maybe do some gamification around some of the training, I think that is also useful as well. But as you said, yeah, there is ongoing costs attached to that, which we'll talk about in a moment. When it comes to employees, yourself personally, Lennox, would you say that organizations that you work with are putting adequate time into data protection programs?
Yep, we've seen a lot of, because our customer base, our client base is many SMEs, small, medium-sized organizations. And obviously, a lot of them are restrained in terms of the budget they have. But we have seen an effort in some organizations to get this program in place because of the risk of it being a huge cost down the road. A lot of organizations are really taking it serious. A lot of people are looking at it, okay, it is a cost now, but what if I don't do it? The future cost is going to be a lot greater than what costs I'm incurring now to get the program up and running.
Yeah. And that's so awesome to hear when I, talk to different service providers, IT firms, HR, accounting, because there's a lot of the back office operations that most entities will outsource, is to hear that customers are taking it seriously and doing something. It's no use just, as you said, it's going to be enacted, right? It's no use just keep, burying your head in the sand. It's better to be prepared. Even if you know that right this second, you may not be able to afford a full-blown custom data protection program, let's at least get some template type stuff in. Let's get some privacy notices. Get your data protection policy, a security policy, a retention schedule. All of these types of details can help you if there is a breach, or if someone makes an inquiry about what you're doing. Then at least you've got some sort of starting point. I think the Privacy Commissioner's Office would look much less favorably on an organization that has done nothing at all versus one that at least can show and demonstrate that it has started to make steps towards a compliance framework for their organization.
Okay. Tia, I want to ask a quick question there because of a comment you just made. So, will it be, would audits be performed by the Office of the Commissioner going forward in terms of will they be randomly selecting companies to go in to see if they're actually complying with the legislation?
Yeah. Obviously, I can't speak on behalf of the Privacy Commissioner's Office, but the legislation does allow for that. So there may be certain industries, certain organizations that process high risk data, perhaps, that may get those random audits, or it might just be completely random. That the commissioner's team goes in and does those audits. I have worked for a company that, had a client that was a company that got audited by the UK's Information Commissioner's Office. Luckily, they didn't find much. There was some room for improvement. There's always room for improvement, right? But they didn't get, they were very impressed with what was in place. They didn't get any fines. There's no sanctions. They didn't even give them any warnings around what was in place because they had already done the work around preparing and getting things put in place with their team as well as their system. So, you could get that knock on your door any day. I think in the first instance, and it may be different in Bermuda, but in the UK when GDPR was enacted, those organizations that people complained a lot about, those were sort of the ones that were targeted first for audits, as you can imagine, right? And then, down the line, it may be more random. So, making sure that your kitchen is clean is a great start to passing some of those audits. And those, it could, the order by the commissioner's office, it could be as slight as, well, you need to put in XY policy or procedure, all the way to you are just mishandling personal data, and we prevent you from using it, right?
Right. Yes.
Until you put something in place. So those orders can vary. The notices can vary that the Privacy Commissioner's Office issues to entities. And of course, it is a legal notice, an order or sanction or fine that would be delivered. So it's not something that's just going to be, slap on the wrist type of work that the Privacy Commissioner will be doing with entities.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you.
Sure. And then the other piece about resources is operations. I do encourage organizations who are I say just starting, you have nothing in place when it comes to a data protection program, is to look at other projects that you've got going on and try and actually make that time work. So I have an example. One company, and this was back during COVID, they were trying to implement their program, but they were also going totally remote with everyone and moving to digital systems. And, it was all these changes. It makes it really hard when, especially, when you're trying to conduct a data map and figure out what data is. Your data is like being migrated off here, and, we're archiving over here. So thinking about, again, data protection should not exist in a silo in an organization. Whoever's responsible for it or is the representative for it, they should have a good understanding of what's happening in the organization. You're implementing a data protection program, you're writing policies. Oh, actually, we just bought another entity, or we're merging with another company 3 months down the line. These things do happen. But having an individual who actually has oversight and understanding of what the organization is doing is a real benefit. So that's why I always recommend data protection shouldn't sit with compliance. It shouldn't sit with IT. It shouldn't sit with the legal. It really should sit in sort of the key executive business units, the boards, if there are those, because then again, you have that sort of long-term view that you can employ when it comes to getting your data protection program in place. So operationally, really looking at what resources are available, at the minimum 6 months. If you know that you're going to be doing some big projects that are going to change the way the organization's using personal data in the next 6 months, then you're going to have to either bring in additional resource or just reduce what people are doing on a day-to-day basis in the organization, because the data protection program will also need to be implemented at the same time. Yeah. Okay. Great. So next we'll talk about passing on costs. And I know as a consumer, I don't want any costs passed on to me.
Yeah, none of us want costs passed on to us.
But of course, it is something. It is a business. As I said, whether you're trying to, I guess, have a balanced budget or have a profitable budget, right? Those costs
Right.
do need to be, paid for. So, do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? What, how organizations can approach that?
Yes, sure. So, as Sierra said, we as consumers don't like to hear about raising prices or costs being passed on. But the reality of it is, costs will continue to be passed on as stuff like salaries rise and that sort of stuff. Businesses are not going to take a loss because most businesses are for-profit businesses, I would say, are in business just for that, for profit. They're not in business to break even or to make a loss. So, in regards to determining how to incorporate cost of a program into your break-even analysis, just like any other cost, you first determine, okay, with this increased cost, what is the level of revenue I'm going to need first to break even, and then when you agree on what your gross margin or gross profit or even your bottom line, your net profit, you want that to be, then you build on top of that. You put on that 40% gross margin on top of that break even cost point. And then from there, then you can then determine what then you have to charge to your customers for your product or service in order to make the level of revenue that you need to maintain a gross profit of 40% or 30%, whatever that is. So it's not treated any differently than any other cost. Obviously, in most cases, in some cases, it might be a direct cost of producing your product or service, but I would probably say in most cases it is an indirect cost, meaning that is like a support cost similar to accounting or administration. But again, those costs also have to be covered in order for the business to make a profit. And you treat that just like that, like any other cost that goes into your break-even analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. And then for organizations that plan to, I would say, eat the cost, because some organizations may not necessarily just pass it on. They may not have a rise in prices. So the massage therapist I mentioned before, she may charge $150 for a massage. She may though find through that cost benefit analysis or through a budgeting exercise that she doesn't actually need to pass on or raise her costs because she may find other areas that can reduce her overall expenses. So one of those I want to pick up on is what you talked about in terms of data storage. You may find some organizations may have offsite storage. So they may have boxes or things like that in an offsite storage facility. They may find that they were storing, 30, 40, 50 boxes that they actually didn't need to keep any longer. So through the data mapping, through their looking at their retention policies, they may actually find that they can make a cost savings as a result of complying with the data protection program. So I just wanted to just highlight there that yes, you may have to increase costs, and we as consumers, may find that prices are raising a little bit more to cover those entities actually putting in place a protection program. But there may be ways that organizations can save money and find those cost savings opportunities so that they don't actually have to raise their costs as well. But I do want to just also put in there, even as a consumer who doesn't like prices to go up, do we want to spend that extra 10 cents to make sure that our data is protected, right? So everything has a cost. So whether you're paying that extra 10 cents or a dollar, and I know things can be tight for some individuals, knowing that your data is actually being protected adequately and appropriately by those organizations, it may make, paying out that little extra, you might be able to take it on a little better as well. Okay, and then we're getting to the end of the show. I do have some comments that did some direct questions that came in, Lennox, so I will read those out in a moment.
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to just touch here. We've sort of talked about it throughout today's talk, but the ongoing cost. So I'll talk to it from sort of the practical side of it. And then you can maybe talk to it about financial, maybe like revenue generations and figuring out ways to cover some of those ongoing costs. So one is retention. So ongoing costs, you may regularly have to go in and destroy data that's no longer, you no longer have a lawful basis or a condition for keeping it, that you don't have a purpose anymore for keeping it. So that is an ongoing cost because you cannot, and I'll repeat it again for the people in the back, you cannot just keep data forever because you want to. At some point, if you do not have the purpose or you don't have a condition, you will have to destroy and dispose of it. So retention, destruction, disposal, that is going to be an ongoing cost, direct cost. It may be administrative of the individual or maybe IT going in and doing that work, as well as the actual destruction and disposal of it. So you may have to get in somebody to or hire a firm to shred the paper for you. You may have to go and get some hard drives destroyed or things like that. So there are some costs around retention. There's costs where it talks about training. So at least once a year, some organizations do it in different ways. So some have that one-off once a year. Everybody does the same training. I don't find those as effective as those annual refresher trainings, being real specific, looking at case studies, looking at things that may have happened in that year and delivering a training that best meets those individuals. Because the best way to, I found, to make people really take information on is to make it personal. So where they can really see how it impacts their workflows as well as their personal liabilities, right? Because again, we all have this personal interest in ensuring that data we're processing is being handled correctly. So training could be e-learning, it could be in person, it could be workshops. I've also started to work with clients who they may have other trainings. So some companies do like leadership trainings. HR delivers training on, customer service, things like that. You can embed data protection into everything. As long as it's got something to do with personal data and individual, you can embed that training, even if it's just a case study, into another training. So again, it's making it more relevant to that industry and to that organization. And then legal and data protection advice. So you may put in your program, you may have done it all DIY. You went to the privacy commissioner's office. It was great, but your organization's changed. No organization should be static in this day and age, right? So you may have to, at some point, you may be entering into a new agreement with a vendor or a client. You may have to go to a lawyer for a legal review of that agreement, or you may go to a data protection consultant or firm to say, well, this is our new, this is sort of this new work we're doing. Should we change our procedures? So you may still have to have some ongoing legal and data protection advice. And like I said, some companies they do, they may retain an organization or a consultant for a fixed amount. So at least they know they've got that budget, and then would use that appropriately. Yeah. And then finally, data mapping. So data mapping should be a living, breathing. Data is constantly changing. You may be moving from a new system to, from a paper-based system to an online system. We're all trying to go cloud-based, virtual these days. So you will have to also think about having some additional costs around that put to the side to make sure that you're able to easily identify and classify any new data sets that are in the organization.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add here is in regards to your overall costs as peers, it doesn't necessarily have to increase. So some organizations might have, let's say, for example, a training budget of $50,000. So at this point in time, um, privacy is a priority. So when you do that priority ranking in terms of what you should be spending your training funds on, you know, a privacy program should be up there in the top. So you can allocate money to that. So your overall training cost is not necessarily increasing. It's just that you're probably not doing less priority training items this year, but you're going to do the privacy training or the privacy program training, which is definitely a priority this year.
Okay.
So that's just one example of how you can, allocate costs, allocate funds to this program without increasing your overall costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And then the final piece, which is just cyber insurance. So you may have limited, if you're on island, there are brokers that do offer cyber insurance policies. A lot of times in those cyber insurance policies, they do have data protection cover as well. So when you're thinking about, and I know, Alex, you may want to talk to this a little bit further because you're sort of more on the end of getting cyber insurance, maybe for clients and things like that. But for cyber insurance, being able to know that you have, X amount available to respond to an incident or, to cover if there is a fine or a sanction, you've got something to be able, you don't have to go find that money in your existing operating budget. Having a bit of insurance for this particular purpose can be some money well spent.
Yeah, insurance is all about passing the risk on. So basically what you're doing there is you're passing the risk of you having to pay this thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're passing that risk from your company itself onto the insurance company, and don't worry about the insurance companies; they'll be fine. That's the reason they're in business, is to allow you to have that peace of mind in terms of not having to worry about, okay, where am I going to get this huge amount of money for me to pay off some person who is suing me because the data was exposed.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say definitely in any case where you can pass that risk on in the form of insurance, not just cyber insurance, all other types of insurance, please do it. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, we've come to the end. I think I've got two questions here. I think one of these should be for you, Lennox. When it comes to HR and rules, what should organizations be doing around data protection?
I think each organization should be, and I mean, at the end of the day, this is really not specific to HR, I would say, but each organization should be examining the role each employee has in terms of handling data and creating what is situations in regards to what can go wrong in this role, in regards to how can this handling the data in this particular role result in a breach or some sort of exposure of data. And then you put controls in place, obviously, to prevent that from happening. So first, you got to determine what if the situation can happen, and then you got to determine, okay, what can I do to prevent that situation from happening? And the other thing in regards to roles I can mention is, and I know we're doing it in the case of my organization, we're actually not hiring someone specifically for to take on this role of the a privacy officer, but we're looking at where people can have the capacity to take on additional work, and this can actually come under their portfolio without increasing my overall payroll costs.
Yeah, that's a good way for because again, it's a privacy representative. It doesn't necessarily have to be one sole individual. I would highly recommend it not being one sole individual, because when that individual goes on holiday or is sick, things will come to a grinding halt. So definitely spreading that knowledge, those responsibilities is a great way to look at it. And then I know we're up to an hour, but I just wanted to quickly, during this last question, which I must admit, I think I get every time I either have a consultation with a client, an entity, or I'm on one of these live streams. When is Piper going to be fully enacted? That is still the $1 million question. All I would say is continue to watch this space. I do know that the Privacy Commissioner's Office will have lots of communications around that as we get closer, as well as just reminder that we are, or Bermuda is the host for the General Privacy Assembly in October. So regardless, whether you've got the legislation as a concern, I think having hundreds of privacy, data protection, and security professionals on island all at the same time should be another driver for entities looking to get their affairs in order. Because as you can imagine, especially if you're in a hospitality or retail, tourism, front-facing organization, those are the ones that are likely to come into contact with these individuals. So I think definitely let's all put on a good show for these professionals, as well as, of course, making sure that we are protecting each other's personal data. So we've come to the end of another live stream. We really appreciate everyone who comes and views and shares this. Remember, you can always catch up. If you can't watch us live, it is available. Abacus, Lennox, can you just remind people if they wanted to reach out to you, how they can do so for Abacus services?
Sure. We have a very interactive website, www.abacus.bm. You can reach out there. There's a section where you can actually send us an email directly from our website, or all of our team members. The numbers for our team members are listed on the team page. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any queries regarding our services, or if you're interested in engaging us for any of our services.
Great, thank you. And again, from the TLC Group, we thank you. If you are interested in what we do as a consultancy and training provider, feel free to visit our website, www.thetlcgroup.pro. Send us a message via our LinkedIn page, or you can email us on solutions@thetlcgroup.pro. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Enjoy your day.
Thank you. Bye.